Yo, Intel responded. Intel has been hooking us up to an IV, slowly drip feeding us cyanide. Bad news after bad news. Intel just does not seem to want to get it together or claim any kind of responsibility for what is going on at all. There's a lot of businesses that are getting like 50% failure rates with their CPUs from Intel. This is affecting their 13th and 14th generation processors. And then we've even seen reports from some companies claiming that they observed nearly a 100% failure rate on their Intel CPUs, and they were actually recommending basically people down here to just swap over to AMD, that they don't want people using Intel processors because you're probably going to have a bad time. And that's scary when Intel's looking like this. This was Q4 2023. It sold 50 million units in 2023. Not to mention 2024. This isn't exactly applied to just 13th and 14th gen processors, but you know a good chunk of the units that they moved, probably some of those processors. That's when 14th gen came out. So this is huge because Intel's catastrophic failure that's happening with their CPUs could be happening to so many people, but we don't really know. And Intel doesn't really want to let us know either. Here we are on Intel's basically community page. This is from Thomas Hannaford, which is an employee. What he does, I don't really know. What he says is, based on extensive analysis of Intel 13th and 14th gen desktop processors returned to us due to instability issues, we've determined that the elevated operating voltage is causing instability issues in some 13th and 14th gen desktop processors. Our analysis of return processors confirms that the elevated operating voltage is stemming from a microcode algorithm resulting in incorrect voltage requests to the processor. Intel has been operating their CPUs at an elevated voltage, and it doesn't seem like this is done on purpose, but who really knows, because Intel has been pushing the power on their processors, and for higher power you need higher voltages. It would not surprise me if this mistake or this bug that was in their microcode, the microcode is literally the code on the CPU, not the code on the motherboard, could have just been because they're pushing their processors too hard as well. So it isn't really unfounded with all of the concern with how hot Intel is pushing their CPUs.
This is the least efficient CPU we've tested anytime recently.
Isn't exactly the same, but this is pretty similar to this, if you remember this from last year.
It's at 35 amps. Oh, it's on fire. Yeah, I can smell it.
Jesus Christ, 200 Celsius.
Holy shit. That's not supposed to be like that.
There's also a level of possible fuckery here that you should be aware of.
AMD's 7800X3, let me see if I can find one, was exploding in some motherboards in some cases. And what this was actually caused by was increased voltage going to the CPU. But in this case, it was actually caused by the motherboard and not the microcode on the CPU itself. What we're seeing right now is it seems like the CPUs are requesting the wrong voltage, and that isn't something that the motherboard can necessarily fix. At least that's how I understand it. So what is Intel doing about this? Well, Intel is delivering a microcode patch which addresses the root cause of exposure to elevated voltages. Good. Intel is supposedly fixing the issue. This is supposed to be the stability problems that are going on with Intel CPUs, but also this could be the thing that is degrading the CPUs, because what we saw in the case of the 7800X3D is it isn't necessarily always that the CPUs were exploding or melting. It's actually maybe a very slow cooking process that would degrade the CPU over time. And I'm just saying, we don't want to slow roast a CPU. I don't think it tastes very good. What we're seeing is that Intel is going to fix this in a patch, and this patch is going to be coming in maybe mid-August. We'll see exactly if that's what ends up happening. Hopefully it's all validated to a point where they can be confident in it, because that's one thing that just has completely sucked about this whole Intel situation. Intel has taken so long on this. People have been reporting issues with their CPUs for over a year now, I'm pretty sure. Over a year on 13th and 14th gen CPUs. Like, this isn't really a new issue. It's becoming more and more prevalent as more and more CPUs seem to be degrading. And Intel's just getting to this. Kind of wild that they've taken this long and that they only are just figuring out what it could be. especially when just last year there was a CPU from AMD that was having a very similar problem.
Now, it's well known at this point that a high VSO set point of, say, 1.35 volts, especially if it actualizes as 1.4 volts, which is what was happening, that will slowly degrade a CPU, and it could eventually lead to this failure that we saw.
AMD fixed it a lot faster, I'm just saying. I'm not like playing sides or anything, but this is pretty weird from Intel. I don't know if they're trying to brush this under the rug or something like that. What Intel is telling people to do is wait for this microcode update that should fix the issue in mid-August. Hopefully more CPUs don't break by mid-August. So Intel said that they're committed to making this right with their customers, okay? And we continue asking any customers currently experiencing instability issues on their Intel 13th and 14th gen desktop processors to reach out to customer support for further assistance. I don't know how to feel about this. I think this is Intel trying to say, hey, just reach out to customer support and we'll help you out, but they don't want to go out and say that we're going to replace everybody's CPUs because that could cost a lot of money. There's something else to take into account. Whenever it's a voltage problem on your CPU or a power problem, remember that the silicon lottery exists and that certain CPUs or processors are just better at handling power. If you aren't having issues now, you might have issues later, or something might never happen to you and you might be completely fine if you got really lucky. And this is the weird thing about this whole situation is it does kind of rely on the motherboard manufacturers to bring this to the motherboards. That's how you update the microcode for your CPUs. This isn't exactly the newest version. This isn't going to solve the problem, but it should help the problem on Intel CPUs. So Asus on their Z790 motherboards, they actually have this update out, not the mid-August one, but they updated microcode 0x125 to ensure ETVB operates within Intel specifications. They have the same thing on their ROG motherboard, the Z790 Gaming Wi-Fi 2. They got Wi-Fi 2 on this thing. This board from ASRock, this is a Z790 Tai Chi, has a similar thing on the latest BIOS, which came out on July 9th. They updated microcode to 0x125. On MSI's Z790 motherboard, they did add this as well. And then this BIOS just came out, actually late June. But something you need to keep your eye out for is not all motherboards are getting this. If you notice, all these other motherboards were Z790 boards, which are the very expensive top-end motherboards from all of these companies. But if you get onto like a B760 motherboard, which is probably more common, the last BIOS update here was from April. And if you're running one of these CPUs, there's no update that would change the profile. Depending on the motherboard you have, it doesn't have an update for this at all. And this also applies to this Gigabyte motherboard, the Z790 Aorus Elite X Wi-Fi 7. The latest BIOS was on July 2nd for this board. This is the Z790 board, expensive board. They don't have any microcode updates. So I don't know if it's going to help the situation that it's in. I think it's kind of interesting because I actually have this motherboard right here and I'm on the latest BIOS because behind the scenes I've been a little sneaky guy and I've been actually testing Intel, or at least trying it. Maybe video coming soon. Let's go ahead and just take a look at it real quick. So here we are in the BIOS of this motherboard. It says Intel default settings performance, and basically that's the only setting that Intel gives you. They can turn it off or you can turn it on. If you turn it off, you're able to go through to the other Gigabyte BIOS options, and these are the old ones. But I wanted to look at the voltages that we're looking at here because they're not exactly that inspiring. If we saw that AMD CPU, the 7800X3D, it was starting to fail over like 1.4 volts, 1.45 volts. And it says here on this Gigabyte BIOS that our CPU goes to 1.2 volts. But when I've been testing this exact BIOS in games or in different tests in general, I've seen this CPU go up past 1.5 volts and regularly be hitting 1.4 to 1.45 in the tests, just playing a game. So this CPU, it's still hitting these voltages until then. And as we know, these voltages can degrade the CPU. That can probably only be fixed from the microcode update. So this is a little scary, but at least we do have a solution that can help with the stability on these CPUs to stop them from killing themselves. It's like these CPUs just can't help but killing themselves all the time. At least it's a software update that can fix these, and maybe a lot of CPUs are recoverable. But you know what can't be recovered in software? A hardware issue. And this is what Intel really doesn't want you to see, because they hid it in a Reddit post. A freaking Reddit post made by just a community manager. It says, I am a tech evangelist and community manager at Intel. My background is in analog electrical engineering. But he's announcing the news for Intel here about this huge thing. And this guy even had a typo in the thing, so you don't have to hunt down the answer. I mean, I love hunting. Basically, there's a whole other situation here that's going on with Intel CPUs, and that is oxidation. Out in the oxygen, you know, the oxygen in the air, and the penny or the copper pipe, it starts turning green. Oxidation. There's a ton of other scenarios where oxidation comes up. It comes up in literally everything in life. Basically is like corrosion, and it happens on a lot of electronics. But when you make a CPU, usually you're in a very sterile, clean environment, and oxidation should not be an issue. But Intel was getting oxidation problems while making their CPUs. You'd think Intel's been doing this for quite a while, you know, like 50 years, and that they wouldn't get oxidation on their CPUs. This is what Intel has to say about it through their community manage on Reddit. You had to hunt down this. When you look up this, okay, let me just show you. Intel oxidation Reddit. A bunch of people are talking about it. This is the actual one with 60 comments. Here's where it is you have to go through this post through somebody else if you just look it up on Google. And then you have to click on this post to get the actual post. And that's what's crazy about this whole situation. This could be a very widespread issue, and Intel is not making it easy to find this or making customers aware of the situation, which could almost go worse for them in the long run. This was the same thing with Intel's website here. Like, they just posted this on their community tab at intel.com. I think the only reason people really found out about this was because of videos on YouTube from like Gamers Nexus, who actually saw this and made this, the viewership of people who actually saw this post, go up. But there's a very high chance that people could be running these CPUs and not even know that there's an issue until they start crashing and dying. So they want to make the whole situation right with customers. But did they even let customers know that there's a problem? Let's look at the Reddit post, okay? So this is about the oxidation. So here's a short answer about the situation. What they say is, we can confirm that there was a via oxidation manufacturing issue addressed back in 2023, and that only a small number of instability reports can be connected to the manufacturing issue. I'm not sure how trustworthy that is. So long answer, we can confirm that via oxidation manufacturing issue affected some early Intel Core 13th generation desktop processors. However, the issue was root caused and addressed with manufacturing improvements in screens in 2023. So they're saying that they solved this oxidation issue, which is probably good. This is probably another reason just to not buy things right as they come out, because there could be issues with manufacturing. There can be bugs in software. We have also looked into it from the instability reports on Intel 13th generation desktop processors, and the analysis to date has determined that only a small number of instability reports can be connected to the manufacturing issue. For the instability issue, we're delivering a microcode patch, which is the one that we just talked about, which addresses exposure to elevated voltages, which is a key element of the instability issue. We are currently validating the microcode patch to ensure instability issues for 13th and 14th generation are addressed, which is basically all that they said. And Intel is being so, oh man, it just seems like they're trying to avoid helping people at every single turn that they possibly can, because they don't tell you what processors were affected by this oxidation. It says that some of them, a small number of them, were connected to the instability. What did the oxidation do? Was it degrading CPUs? Should you expect issues if you have an oxidized CPU? We don't know. And Intel, instead of just saying that, they said The issue was root caused and addressed with manufacturing improvements in screens in 2023. When in 2023? It's a whole year. Does Intel want to give you a serial number range for the manufactured CPUs? Like, oh, these ones from this range to this point in time, these ones could have issues. And if you have issues, then you should contact us. They don't give us a serial number of what CPUs had issues. Why? Why? I think I know why. It's because they don't really want to help. And that doesn't really surprise me with multi-bajillion dollar company. And they might believe, and you can even see with the edit of this post, they clarified in short answer on Oxidation that there is a small number of instability reports connected to the manufacturing issue. That's what it is now. But before it said, but is not related to the instability issue. So Intel edited this. It's kind of like going back in time and re-editing a tweet like Dr. Disrespect that's saying that, oh, this wasn't an issue at all, to saying, oh, it is actually an issue, but it isn't affecting every CPU. So it does seem like these voltage issues and the oxidation issues that we're seeing, the manufacturing defect, these are two separate issues, but they could also be affecting each other, because maybe if your CPU gets oxidized, it can't handle as much voltage, and then it could start having instability problems a lot earlier, or not be able to handle as much voltage as ones that aren't oxidized. This is something to know. And it's also to know is if your CPU was oxidized, is it going to perform worse? Are you going to be getting worse performance than what you're advertised? And that's a whole other thing, whole other can of worms. A microcode update, which is going to deliver less voltage to the CPUs, could very well mean that the CPUs don't get as much power, which means that the CPUs won't perform as quickly. And that means you're getting less than advertised speeds. Intel said one thing and then they give you another thing in the end product. Now, what they should do in this situation is I think they should give a rebate to people who bought their processors to get a discount if there was an issue. I think they should offer refunds and also give a rebate to people who keep their CPUs. They're apparently making it right with customers, but they're not really offering solutions to the problem at all. Would this be something that develops into the future? Maybe. I'm not really sure. Intel is a massive company that has tons of CPUs, tons of people rely on them. Over the years, at least recently, it feels like Intel's trust with the consumer has been slipping. And we can kind of see this with the global market share on Intel and AMD, because if we see on the desktop CPU market share, the AMD has even crossed paths with Intel a couple of times about how many people are actually buying AMD CPUs versus Intel CPUs. I'm laughing because I saw this ad over here. What the fuck is this ad? Yeah, this is pretty much a deplorable and disgraceful response from Intel. I don't really see them wanting to make it right with anybody. And I get it that they're a bajillion dollar company and they want to keep profits as much as they can. I would love for them to be more transparent and really give people what they deserve. You can't buy a processor that has an issue on it and then to nonchalantly put this in a Reddit post, put this on a community post on their tab, and act like it doesn't happen. It's like if we aren't here like on YouTube or on different tech outlets on making articles or something like that, how would people know about this? How would people know about this? And even with us telling people, not everyone is going to find this because not everybody is nerds watching tech shit on YouTube. And it's just frustrating. It's frustrating. And this is in stark contrast to what AMD is doing, because AMD's 9000 series Ryzen CPUs are just coming out on July 31st. That's when AMD announced these, but AMD is actually delaying the launch of their 9000 series CPUs. They said during final checks, we found that the initial production units that were shipped to our channel partners did not meet our full quality expectations. AMD found some flaws with their CPUs and they chose to not ship them to customers, even though they already had this release plan. It was already shipped to retailers. But it seems like Intel, with this whole situation here, their oxidation, they found out this issue was happening in 2023 and they didn't address anything that they sold before. They didn't even tell customers that this was a thing. It's like whether or not AMD is doing this out of the goodness of their heart, I completely doubt that they are. I mean, they are a bajillion dollar company too. Come on, let's be honest. At least AMD is doing this. And I guess if AMD did have issues that would have happened with 9000 series CPUs, it's very possible they would have looked even worse. I think AMD is being hyper vigilant right now to make sure that kind of stuff doesn't happen. All you can really do right now, if you're on an Intel 13th or 14th gen CPU, is update to the latest BIOS that you have at the moment. This doesn't necessarily fix the issue, and hopefully the new BIOSes with the microcode updates will be coming out in mid-August. Intel has been very late on things lately, so hopefully they keep to their word here. I just want this issue solved. Everybody deserves a CPU that doesn't kill itself constantly, okay? All you can do right now is that, and I completely condemn Intel for acting the way that they've acted, being completely not transparent, shifting blame, making it hard for customers to find what the issues are, and at the same time not really giving people a clear resolution of what they can do if they have permanent damage on their CPUs. It's like, I'm glad Intel did say something finally and didn't just try to whoosh this under a rug somewhere. At the same time, how they did it is probably the most disrespectful and insulting way they could have possibly done this. Multi-billion-dollar company does multi-billion-dollar things. It is what it is. You know, other than me testing the CPU, hopefully this won't be an issue anymore. Hopefully you don't have issues on your CPU. Stay safe, stay vigilant too with these issues if you do have them. And that's been it for me. I'm gonna see you in the next video. Y'all have a good one. Peace.